Hey guys, I'm back with a new series, episode 1, The Business of Hate. We're now around the year 2000. Turn of the millennium. I'm 22 years old. I just completed training as senior foreign trade merchant. Did I shorten it to that? Actually, it was relatively easy. It came naturally to me. I also got a good offer to be taken on, but that wasn't up for debate for me. I already explained that briefly at the end of the series Einstieg Rechts. Maybe you can check there and watch the last parts. So I was living in my parents' house in an apartment upstairs. Melanie moved in with me pretty quickly. We ended up living a pretty conventional, normal life there. We didn't go to concerts anymore and demonstrations were no longer up for discussion. Visually, I toned it down a bit, but I still stuck to the usual scene-typical style of clothing. But a bit more subtle. This isn't hate against the brands. It's not their fault either. But still typical enough that you wear brands like Doc Martens, Fred Perry, and Ben Sherman. But still, it's a bit more low-key. I still had my closet full, including printed t-shirts from Cheers to the Fatherland to something with hate, and so on. It's really embarrassing today when I see those pictures. Patrons of the channel can always see that on Patreon. It was like this. Melanie was working in her medical profession and was earning pretty well. My parents chose not to take any money from us and set up the upstairs apartment. My father also gave us money so we could install a kitchen upstairs and put up a wall, so we actually lived quite well there. Bathroom, guest toilet, large living room, and 2 bedrooms plus 3 additional rooms. So actually, everything was easy, really easy. My self-employment was going terribly. I had lost money through textile trading with Croatia. That went really wrong, and now I've realized it. To sell hooligan t-shirts on eBay. The internet has really made its way into the right-wing extremist scene, the right-wing scene as well. There was a lot going on. The mail-order companies switched from sending out catalogs. For years, things were sent out using paper lists, but now many have started setting up online shops to clean a larger quantity, a faster quantity, and that was really revolutionary for this scene. Also because they thought, well, now we can reach many, many more people, just a few clicks, and they're with us. And I can easily imagine that the revenues increased enormously because of that as well. That was also the case for me. You could quickly browse through, and a kind of price war started a little bit. The euro wasn't there yet. CDs were 30 marks, but early online sales dropped to 28, then 26 marks with discounts. You could compare, so things really started happening and eBay really took off. And back then, eBay didn't have any control mechanisms that said, no, we don't want any hate speech, no xenophobic stuff, and so on. They had done a little bit about it, but basically you could still get around it pretty easily. As I said, I was under pressure myself. I had trouble sleeping because of starting my own business. I had let everything slide. I had, as I said, received a KfW promotional loan. My parents gave me money to start a business, but I let that opportunity pass too. I just drifted through my days, played computer games. Melanie was working and wasn't really active. But then suddenly I had the idea, hey, let's do something with t-shirts from this soccer hooligan scene. Back then I founded the label Bully Boy, and Melanie drew a few things for it. We then had a few designs, motifs, of course the classics, ACB and so on, but I had already explained all that briefly, so it worked out. I then put them on eBay, and there were regular sales. But not yet. So you can say I can pay taxes, health insurance, and cover all costs with that. That wasn't possible yet. Melanie also wasn't happy in her job and wanted a change. But of course, it was completely unrealistic to think that I could already cushion anything with self-employment. Now, I was considering the available sales channels. Where do I have contacts, and what about myself? Back then, I was something like a Nazi troll, right-wing troll, and I was hanging around in forums on other political sites. I started to act like a kind of political soldier on the internet, commenting on all sorts of nonsense. From a high know-it-all horse, rambling on, not really looking for discussion, but rather acting with an absolute claim to the truth. Not discussing, but throwing around a claim to the truth. A lot of extremists have that they also act like what they say is the absolute truth. That's why it's so hard to find a consensus or a compromise, and why it's so difficult to have a discussion, because their opinion is set in stone. And you're not allowed to deviate from that even a little bit because of the group. And if I gave in to someone and so on, I was one of them and hung around there. But that means these forums of our own that we had, they did. Most mail order companies were founded that way. Back then, there was someone who ran a forum. He was a mail order dealer for Nordic mythology and music and things like that. And then there was a forum called Hate Forum TK or something like that. And all of a sudden, a lot of people started hanging out there. Nationwide, across Europe and worldwide, right-wing extremists and radicals gathered there, meeting to discuss all kinds of topics. There were discussions and everything. Suddenly CDs were reviewed, new releases, t-shirts and ideas were exchanged. So that was already a big step, even for the right-wing extremist scene, this internet, that people saw it as an opportunity there. And I spent a lot of time there. Back then, I picked a pseudonym for myself. I didn't want to work under my real name, Philip Schlaffer, like I do now. And I had chosen a pseudonym, and that name, back then, I called myself Harry Anderson. That was the name that appears in a Lanza song. And then I adopted that name. And I used that name on the internet for the next few years. Beaks, and so you basically got to know each other virtually. Many people here can probably imagine that. When you chat a lot in forums, you agree with some people and not with others. Some people are likable because maybe they have a funny or ironic writing style sometimes, and so on. You start to feel like you're getting to know each other and forming a community. That works exactly the same way in right-wing extremism. And that's exactly how I felt there. That was what I liked about it, something new for me. After being disappointed in the right-wing scene in Lübeck or Schleswig-Holstein, I realized the internet suited me much better. First, I can stay home if I want, and second, I can choose who I talk to and spend time with. But of course, does that have a lot to do with loneliness? I spent a lot of time alone at home, playing games and browsing forums on my computer. I waited for Melanie to come home, which was something. Maybe loneliness was also a kind of escape. I should really think about that more closely. And then it was like, I thought, well, man, I shouldn't just be selling on eBay. These shirts, man, why am I not actually offering them? Why am I actually not offering them to mail order dealers from the far right scene? But at first, I had the idea, of course, I'll try to distribute them through these kinds of hooligan shops. So back then, there were also these clothing brands, probably still around today, like Hooligan, Pitbull, and so on. All these companies that existed that made those clothes people used to wear back then. There was that too. Online stores already existed back then, selling all sorts of items. I contacted them, but most of the time I didn't even get a response. Of course, I can understand that. I just produced something without much planning. It wasn't a brand, and then I wanted to sell it to them so they could put it in their shop. Of course, you always get those kinds of answers, and they say, yeah, sure, I'll put it in. If something sells, we can settle up. But I wasn't in a financial position to do that. Well, I kind of overestimated my own idea, thinking that they would catch on to it like that. It wasn't exactly a killer idea, but I did overestimate it a bit, and that's where I am. That's how it was. There was some disappointment that the soccer hooligan scene didn't really take off. I also tried to set up a shop just for Bully Boy, not just through eBay, but a shop only for Bully Boy. I also added other brands of bomber jackets, flight jackets, and so on. I also tried including the scene clothes I mentioned earlier, like Fred Perry and Ben Sherman, but it wasn't easy. These were kids who had already burned themselves on the stove, so to speak, with right-wing extremism and so on. And that's why none of it really worked. And I thought, man, screw it, actually. Why only focus on the soccer scene? I even tried to think of a homebody. Mr. Greenman, we called. Worried. Also a lot of forbidden things and so on, and was very politically informed at that time. At least that's how I got all of that through the internet, like I said. And then I thought, well, with the Bully Boy brand, you can also go to right-wing distributors. And then it was like this. I contacted those right-wing distributors from the internet and everyone I knew, and I said, well, I've now produced this brand here and so on. And I wanted them to include it in their program. And I have to say, today there are Today, many people are active in these shops. And there is an incredible selection of thousands of clothes in right-wing extremism. That wasn't the case back then. It was more like a transition from a kind of scene to this. They aimed to modernize, which was a frequent topic of discussion. So away from that image, the one I also embodied, fighting, the visual, the drinking, Nazi skinhead. There were a lot of efforts to break away from that, to blend in with the crowd. The way it's still done today, it's basically the same on the inside, and at that time there wasn't a lot of choice yet. That means when I wrote to the right-wing distributors, I actually got quite a few messages back saying, yeah, cool stuff. I would buy some of that, and at first I was happy about it. But only one of these distributors was actually willing to buy these t-shirts. And I couldn't really do much with that, because I thought, well, how else did you imagine getting paid? And that's usually how it works, the shipping. The producers within the right-wing scene often exchange things, so everyone produces something. Everyone has something xenophobic. And they reach out to other mail-order dealers and ask, I have this new shirt, can I trade it for yours? That means you trade 100 of your shirts for 100 other shirts, or you trade 100 t-shirts for 100 CDs. That's something that's common there. Money rarely changes hands. That only works if you've produced something that everyone needs a lot of, then you can actually sell those things. Everyone tries to trade, that's just how it is. It was also possible back then, like trading 100 t-shirts for 100 CDs, because both sold for 30 marks, later 15 euros. So you could just trade a t-shirt for a CD and so on. That means most of the people who contacted me wanted to trade the thing, which I thought was pretty cool with some of them. I was also a music listener myself, so a distributor contacted me and said, yeah, send me 50 copies. For that, you can pick 50 CDs from my productions, meaning CDs he produced for me. I thought, yeah, awesome, not necessarily a smart business move, because I had to produce and pay for the 50 t-shirts and then got 50 CDs, which I just added to my private CD collection. That wasn't a good deal, and I had that problem. Even if someone said they take 100 shirts from me and then said, yeah, you can take 100 CDs now, but how am I supposed to get rid of them? Yeah, I said, of course. I still had a small circle of acquaintances and friends here, where I could say, yeah, okay, you can take something here. If I only get rid of 8 out of 100, I still have 90 CDs left. What am I supposed to do with them? Means I was almost forced to change something here. I also had the first one. The first mail order company that contacted me was actually not that far from me. It was based in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. This little town was about 50 or 60 kilometers away from me. And he said, yeah, man, I'll buy 100 or 200 pieces right away. I'll do it immediately. At that time, he was a very ambitious and rapidly growing mail order dealer who also had big financial goals. And he said, sure, I need to expand my range. That's good for us. Naturally, I thought, great, 200 pieces at once. In wholesale, did you earn that much? And then we exchanged a few emails and arranged to talk on the phone. And he said, hey, why don't you come by sometime? Or when the t-shirts are ready, just bring them over. I agreed, saying it was a good idea to get to know each other. Maybe you'll want more t-shirts later. And then I started, as I said, by trading a few t-shirts. I sent them off and then got the CDs, and suddenly I had, 200 or 300 CDs lying around, but I didn't know what to do. And then the mail order company from Gräbesmühlen, which was no secret. He also said to me, yeah, but do you have any other things? I mean, I could use something that really packs a punch right now. Soccer is great, Bully Boy sounds good too, and his pictures are nice. ACB goes on the right. Yeah, of course, even though it's the dumbest saying in my opinion, but that's just what I used back then. But we want to be honest, and said, don't you have something that's a bit more political, something that stands out? Yeah, people want striking messages. They want something political. Yeah, and I thought, I haven't really dared to do that yet. I have to be honest, you really have to think that through. I thought, yeah, do I really want that? I knew that it also brings a bit of trouble with it. And you? Now I'm still living with my parents, and I actually felt more comfortable in this soccer thing. And I said, well, I'll just finish the 200 shirts first, and then I'll get going. Then next week, I'll head over to you when the shirts are finished. After I've had them all produced and labeled and so on, then I'll come to you. He agreed and said, let's do that. And then I wasn't prepared for what I would experience there. And that was really the starting point for me. How it was supposed to start then with the business, with the hate. That's where I learned and saw something where I said, yes, that's great. That's what I'll do. Guys, thank you so much again for always watching, for being here. Give it a thumbs up if you like it. Give it a thumbs down if you think it's crap. And always feel free to comment. Background information, data, and so on can be found with Patrick. And if you become a partner, I'll put pictures in there. Also, the search orders and other parts of the legal process will bring many videos and audio messages and so on. I'm glad if you support that. Also, visit the Verwil and Extremist Loss website.de. And I hope you'll like this new series too. We also need to slowly build up the story here so that you understand it, so you get insights into how this music scene, how this music business works, what's behind it, who the people behind it are, and how the processes work. And so that we can clear this up a bit and take apart this myth that they're all political fighters, because even in this scene, it's about something, and that's what mattered to me in the end. Also, as always, it's about money. So guys, I'll leave you with one from the coast me.